All right, this morning we're going to talk a little bit about funky data. Everybody wants to know when they have good data, when they so everybody wants to kind of talk about how to read the data quality for in P, and then if you don't have good data, kind of some of the common problems, how to fix it. One of the quickest ways to look at is drop scatter. Drop scatter should be small, standard for your look. Take measurement. You'll what it should. This right here, people in 8.9 is the best data. So that's really good. You know, we're here at 20 microgals, 25 microgals, 25, big building. Hitting that. Great. This one's working. Set scatter should also be very small, and the set should be very flat. 2 microgal is great. A10 runs a little bit different. I know one you actually have to run red blue as frequency inside of the if you average. So the gravity value is actually perfect. But again, make sure each red blue is pretty flat.
Residuals is another way to tell if things are good or not. If the test mass is way far from where it should be, you know, way far from this parabola, then things could be going wrong, such as test mass hitting the cart or
The blue line down here is the best fit label. Yesterday or the day before, is it a predicted or is it the best fit of that data?
best fit of this data. Okay. All right. So yeah, it's where should it be? It's the best fit. Nice. What we're looking for is gravity. What makes this curve is gravity, and that changes a little bit from site to site. So yeah.
And then it's the difference of the red.
And again, as long as the residuals are very flat and very small, you're looking good. Good residuals, yep. So even if the single drop has a high frequency, large scatter, if that averages out, that means that it's not systematic and you just have a high scatter drop for that one. We talked about the fit sensitivities a little bit. You can open up these windows in order to find how sensitive you are to your fit window. I think it shows it on the next page. This too wants to be flat, and the amplitude very small. Some common setup mistakes. The ring down, if you know how we hit the servo button. If you hit the servo button and then hit go on your screen, you might see that your drop scatter is very large in the beginning, and you'll see that kind of come in. So wait a few minutes after you hit servo before you start collecting data. It will eventually quiet down quite a bit, and you'll be fine. Wrong button. System coupled. Sometimes, you know, if you're trying to do this, trying to do that, you forget to lift up your dropper. Now your dropper's sitting right on top of your super spring, and every time it drops, it just, you know, creates vibrations in the super spring. You'll see that again in the drop scatter. If your interferometer's having issues, you forgot to check fringes, and maybe they're very small because your alignment isn't good. Sometimes it'll trigger, sometimes it won't. So problems there. You don't wait for your rubidium clock to lock. It will only run on the computer clock, and your timing will be very far off and not good. And that goes directly into your gravity measurement because your time distance pair. Kind of mentioned this, dropper issues, hitting the side or top or bottom. So if your bubble levels are way off, test mass falls straight down, but your cart is moving at an angle. By the time it gets down here, it might hit the side of the cart. If tuning is off, the cart might speed up too fast and the test mass will run into the top of the cart or vice versa. It lifts off, but then the test mass catches up to the cart, hits them, and kind of bounces as it goes down. You'll see all those issues in the residual window.
Is tuning adjusted by us?
It can be if it needs to be. It's all digital.
It's not part of the normal setup. I didn't remember doing it.
Yeah.
So that's all done at Micro-g. With the new SIM-X and the new FG5-X motor combination, it is pretty standard. The old systems, you had to get in there and turn knobs. Like, okay, turn up the gain just a little bit. Oh, turn up the damp a little bit. And so the old guys, they know how to do all that stuff. Like Dave tunes his, I'm sure, on a regular basis just because of the design of the system. The new one, terminal or something like that. It's through a terminal program that talks to the SIM-X. All done at Micro-g. If you're finding that you do have issues, give us a call and we'll help you out to change some stuff. But yeah, the new system is almost plug and play every time. So you can't have poor vacuum. And I'll show you examples of a lot of these things here coming up. But poor vacuum you'll see in the residuals as well. If you lose power to the ion pump controller or something like that. Laser issues, your laser's unlocking ML1, you don't have to worry about that. If for some reason your modulation frequency got changed in the software, you'll see weird issues. And then laser peak-hopping. If you always remember to check your 1Fs and leave it on e-peak detection, detect the peak, not e-peak. This problem becomes less and less, but I'll show you how to identify that as well. And then software issues, your PC clock can be wrong, and that's just corresponds to tide. So you'll see a huge tide signal. We already actually saw this one. This is a great timeout, check trigger, fringe amplitude. So if it's looking for fringes and it doesn't get fringes, there's a couple of problems. There could be a couple of different problems. In our case, we forgot the USB. At that point, it didn't lift or drop. But if it lifts and drops and waits, then I try to play that trick on you, right? That left the beam blocker in. So if the beam blocker is in, or the alcohol pool, you left the alcohol pool in there. TTL cable was in the wrong spot. You know how yesterday afternoon we plugged it into the sign. If we did hit go at that point, it would lift, drop, not get any fringes because it was going to the wrong place, and then would time out. So you'll see this timeout number. The key to troubleshooting that is if it doesn't do anything, that's a communication issue. If it lifts, drops, and then waits, then it's probably a fringe issue or setup issue. Either your laser's not on or beam blocker, that kind of thing. So you're just not getting fringes. So, so all these, bad alignment, trigger cable, we talked about it, dust cap on. Like if you leave those caps on after the setup, you're like, oh, there's a cap right there. Tear it down. Definitely pay attention to that. So this is what it looks like if you hit go too soon after servo. You can see here how the scatter in the beginning of the project is much higher, and then it kind of just comes in. And that's what's happening is the spring is being controlled, but it has this little bit of ring, it has to ring down and get to a stable position. Go get a cup of coffee, start the measurement 5 minutes later. If you have very high, very consistent fit residuals in the 5 nanometer, even greater range. This is going to be most likely the systems per coupled. This high frequency noise is the bearings. As it goes up and down, you can hear the bearings. That's getting coupled directly into the super spring and just vibrating the super spring.
So it would be if you didn't raise the feet up?
Yeah. And I'll give you this. This is a great reference. I refer to this PowerPoint all the time in the lab when I'm trying to do troubleshooting, so you'll get this one as well. And, there's a slide at the end that kind of summarizes the scale of the problem and what it most likely is. So. These are those drop fit sensitivities. So this is the top of the drop as you're starting at 0 roughly milliseconds and the first little chunk of it, and then the bottom chunk of the drop. Again, this could be system still coupled, but if they look like this, which is just garbage, normally it's a flat line at not even plus minus 1 microgal. That will tell you something pretty quickly. Yep, earthquakes. I thought we were having an earthquake with just me walking over here with my feet earthquake. Here you can kind of start to see a sine wave in there, but definitely like through here. See how that sine wave comes in? That's the sine wave of the earthquake just going through. And the super spring does its best to deal with that, but I mean when the ground's really rocking, it's not going to be able to account for that. So you have to really just wait. The nice thing about G is if it does see a set with a very high, 500 microgal set scatter or drop scatter, it automatically weights that less than the better sets. So you can be confident in your G value still because this set has less weight than the rest of the sets. So. You can see this is, can't remember who that is. There's a person inside that tent. This is one of our A10s. You actually have to put a piece of equipment on top of the A10 in order to check verticality instead of just put it in the alcohol pool in there. So he's sitting in there trying to check verticality. Verticality is a big one. 1 spot diameter off is about 4 microgal. 2 is 16, so it goes up quick. The nice thing about verticality and most of these things that I'm showing you, it never makes the gravity value high. It only makes the gravity value low. So if you know you have you were here 6 months ago and my gravity value is X and now I'm 200 microgals low, there could be one of these issues. If you're 200 microgals high, then that really narrows things down. So out here, Ryan Alberry, this is a contractor we used to use, and he was up in Prudhoe Bay, Alaska. Just barren.
Is that on like glacier?
That's in the bay.
Okay.
Yeah, so the bay, Prudhoe Bay, freezes over in the spring, winter, and into the fall. They go out on the ice and measure they drive trucks across it, right? So, but they measure basically what's underneath the bay. I think this is a big oil field, and they inject water in one side to push the oil out the other side, and so they kind of monitor the reservoir to make sure they're injecting correctly and not pulling out too much. If you pull out too much real quick, then you don't get it all. So. Small fringes, so if you have less than maybe like 220 or even below, you might start seeing issues like this, and you might ask, what's the problem here? Can't always see stuff at the normal scale. You can see like your average is pretty good, but there's definitely one that has been rejected. So there's a line here and a line here. What you want to do is you want to zoom out. So this is basically this on a different scale. But what you're doing is you maybe get 1 or 2 fringes here and you're skipping a fringe, and that sets you off by one fringe sets you off by 312 nanometers. So if you click on this scale, on this axis, double click on it, it'll pop up a window and allow you to change the scale on the axis. Definitely if you think you're having problems, make sure you're doing that. Yeah, make sure fringes are maximized 300 to 400. We say 380 at the top end, just so that you're not, if you do lose power, you're not pushing this end. Yeah, sometimes to get the fringes up, you gotta you gotta work in the field. So this is the clean room. Get a new dropper aligned in the interferometer. So this is the A10. Basically, the IB interferometer is housed in here, and the super spring. The laser is actually on board in this case, underneath on the bottom. And then this is the dropper part. You can see chunks hanging off. We got a ion pump controller hanging off there. And then alongside with the big cat. This is what it looks like when your video clock won't lock or it hasn't locked yet. So it's running along. You probably started taking the measurement too soon, and then finally it locks, and now you're looking good again, and then it unlocks again, and so you'll see huge steps in your gravity value if there's something wrong with your rubidium clock. In this case, they just disconnected it. So another screenshot of the residuals. You can see again the scale, too small to see the problem. You zoom out, now you can see the parabola. And right here, it's hitting the cart, the test mass is hitting the cart, and you get weird interferometer, fringe issues. So it's trying to take that and fit it into the parabola, and it just throws it way off, and it's not able to do it. So at that point, you either can chop your data back. Sometimes, this is an A10 that usually catches at 135 milliseconds. You can chop it back to 110 milliseconds and maybe salvage that data. So it's only trying to fit this data before it hits. But that's kind of an in-field band-aid, if you will. Definitely once you get back to the lab, you'd want to give us a holler, and we'll try and figure out why you're hitting early. Usually on the old systems there's a tuning issue, and you just crank up the gain a little bit, and then you're good. On these, like I was saying, the tuning, you don't really need to tune them anymore. They don't really change. So if it's hitting, then it might be more of like dropper bubble levels. Maybe if your dropper's off, like we talked about, or there's damage inside the test mass itself. Like the balls and V's. One of the V's is completely broken off, or something like that. That can happen, but it doesn't usually happen. This problem doesn't happen with FG5. It's great. If you have a project up and you're still in OS mode and you hit go, it's smart enough to know, oh no, I got to put in drop. Now I trigger. We were talking about the other day, if the test map or the cart is at the top and you hit go, it'll actually bring it down, then lift it up and just drop. The old FG5 unfortunately wasn't smart enough to fix that problem. If you started with the cart at the top of the drop, it would trigger and think it was lifting, but it would actually drop, and then it would trigger again and it would lift. And so that's out of sync. And that you would see stuff like this. Your drop value is half or a third of what you would expect, and that's because it's measuring gravity on the way up instead of on the way down. So these are a couple of employees, Micro-g employees, in the cave trying to fix things in Luxembourg, while our buddy Derek just takes pictures. So they're not too happy because they're doing all the work and Derek's walking around taking pictures. Port vacuum, this is pretty classic. If you see this single sine wave, you got a bad vacuum. You're going to want to check your current, check your ion pump current voltage. You might need to slap the turbo pump back on, try and get it pump back down, and keep going. Yeah, very classic vacuum pump. And as the vacuum gets worse and worse, this will get bigger and bigger because the test mass is running into more and more molecules. Doesn't apply too much, but if the other laser, the helium neon laser only without the iodine, a lot of times if you turn it on too quick and you don't give it time to warm up, you'll see this big drift in the gravity value. That'll be yeah, that just means you gotta go get a cup of coffee and come back in a little bit. ML1, same thing, we'll probably skip this. I showed you that modulation frequency underneath the 1Fs that gets set at Micro-g. All the new lasers have the same modulation frequency. There's a batch of older lasers that had a different one. So if maybe you copy a project over from somebody else, or somehow your project gets corrupt, if you don't have the right modulation frequency, you'll see huge, residuals, high frequency residuals.
Question.
Yes.
For our purposes, what's the difference between a WEO 100, which we have, and a WEO 200?
I don't have much experience with the 200. It is a
I know it's got two lasers.
And then they somehow combine. We don't use them with this. I don't know the applications for the 200. In the set, excuse me, the set sensors, or even in the drop sensor, you'll see we have a section for the laser, where the laser 1Fs get recorded. So if this is the 1F value that you normally check with the scope, the voltmeter, you'll see here where it jumps up and then jumps back down. That's what's called a peak hop. So basically it's going from E, it's like E, 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 F, E, 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 and you can see this is actually sets. So you can see these three sets where our value was actually minus 250 millivolts. We jump up by about 20, almost two peak hops. Jump up by almost 30 microgals. That's one, yeah. So one peak hop should be about 25 microgals. If you're monitoring your 1Fs and it does this, and you have, that checkbox that says no, look at the 1F values and know what the peak is from that, this won't happen. You'll see this jump up, but it'll correct for it, and it'll say, oh, I'm on F peak, and these will be nice and flat. So yeah, here if the 1Fs are measured, and the software monitors the 1Fs, it knows which wavelength it's on, and that goes away. So you can see the difference between this one's down, those three are up, back down.
So that would happen if you didn't have that box check that said auto detect.
The 1Fs. Yep. So if you don't have it on and your laser peak hops, that's what happens. If you do have it on and your laser peak hops, that's what the data is.
So if you have it set to E, you don't want that box check, you're just staying on E, and it does hop, that's when your data will get like that.
Yep. And if nice thing is, if at that point you did have your 1Fs plugged in, you could reprocess with monitor 1Fs, and it would fix the data. So always monitor or always record your 1Fs. And that's this cable in the front that goes from the laser box to the SIMX, and just always leave that checkbox on. It's kind of what it comes down to. PC clock set wrong. This is going to give you a nice tide signal, is what it's going to do. So you're going to be off by, anywhere from 5 minutes. You can see here 5 minutes is about 1 microgal. And then if it's off by an hour, looks like it's 10 to 100 microgals. There's 30 plus or minus 30, so 60 microgal signal. Anytime you see this with a period of, we're from 6 to 6, so a 12-hour period, tides are roughly 2 periods in a 24-hour day. Definitely look at lat long or PC clock.
24 hours less 11 minutes.
Didn't know that. Yeah, ocean load files, just make sure you run that ocean load, because that can also be, this. It's all kind of self-explanatory. Software setup issues. This was back when we were using a huge lunchbox type PC on top of it here. The keyboard folds down off the monitor and stuff like that. It was one of the first portable computers. I can't remember. I think they dropped a screw inside it or something like that, and so they had to just completely rip it apart. Yeah, drop a screw. That's always fun. You're in the middle of this case. It was Madrid, Spain, and somebody had to rip apart the computer. So we're kind of going to sum it up here. This is kind of the level of the issues. So if you're kind of in a 0 to 10 microgal problem, you're going to want to check verticality, setup heights, and then everything else. So as the problem gets smaller and smaller, it actually can be more and more things. So if it's 1,000 microgals or bigger, it's pretty much only the rubidium clock. If you're 100 to 1,000, then it's probably a laser locking issue, but it could also be a rubidium clock. So this is kind of a good check, especially if you know the value. Problem is if your value is fluctuating in the kind of 10 microgal range, it can be, there's a chance that it could be any one of these things as well. So good list to keep going back to. Yeah, the key is if something seems off, there's a good chance it is. Stop, take a look at data, check the scale of the problem, make sure if it's a little tiny problem or is it a huge problem, and then always double check, drop scatter, set scatter, residuals, fit sensitivity. Take your time, don't panic, give us a call, give us an email. Get you set up. So.
Check out the website.
Yep, check out it. Just leave the website up. So, more pictures. It's kind of like the one you were talking about. Thank you. Questions?